All right. Just tilt this. All right. Let's made any. Right. So just share this. Sharing it. Un momento, por favor. Right. I see it. I see it. All right. All right. I see what's going on. All right, just one moment, folks. All right. Inna alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih al-Mustafa wa ala ibadi alladhina irtada ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد. Whoa, what's going on? Did that not get shared? Oh, it did. All right, let me also go into the questions. All right, أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا Khushamadid, Juan Ying Layth, bienvenidos a todos. Esta lección, people, and above, and not forgetting swagatam. A shout out to, I can't read your name in Chinese, man. Alright, ¿cómo está? Alright, muy bien. ¿Y tú, what's up? Ayub, Amir, Adnan, ahlan wa sahlan bikum, folks. Salamullahi ala al-qawm. Alright. Estoy muy bien. Right, people, what's going on, man? What's going on? Ya salam. I'll be taking some of your questions tonight. I did want to discuss as well. Alright. I did want to discuss Adnan, ahlan wa sahlan, Muhammad Aftan, Rash. Alright. Rash from Olympia Gym, people. Doing it. Anas, ahlan wa sahlan. Jupiter, somebody just said Jupiter. I got no idea what that is referring to. Right, so there's a few things I did want to also discuss today, that this Joe Rogan kind of show on Islam, the dangers of Islam. So I'll chat about that a little later on. Momo, ahlan wa sahlan. Amy, Solomon, Kavanj. Alright, so people, what's going on? Well, I went to Glasgow just to share some experience with you all, people. So this Saturday night we had a conversation event that went down at al-Andalus Center by courtesy of Ustad Javed. Alright, all the way from Glasgow. So he set it up at his center. He's got an amazing this whole place, really. There's so much in that place. I thought it was just some regular, like you get some community small, but it's actually quite a big, very impressive center that he's got operational. Ustad Javed has, named after the al-Andalus, for the whole, the coexistence, the harmonious coexistence that took place in al-Andalus. And so we were there anyway. It was good. Got to meet some of the locals. Awesome. Awesome stuff. Gotta say, I do find I think the Scottish accent is it's good, isn't it? I don't understand half of what's being said, but I find it really it's got a I mean, obviously it's unique, but it's got a very kind of dynamic, attractive feature to it. Just being very my impersonation of it is going to totally make it so, just absolutely weird. It's like got away bit, you know, got away. But it was good. So we met some of the locals, had a chit chat, conversation, some Q&A. Amir Shafiq, alright, Amir Shafiq was there. Alright, Amir, you're doing it. The accent, I'm actually saying the accent is cool. Although, admittedly, I couldn't understand sometimes some of the things being said. I was like, but it's good. It's awesome. Right. So, and I think there was a diverse, I don't know, I think the people that attended, it was good, like I said, to meet different people who I think they may not even necessarily agree with my way of looking at things always, but nevertheless they have that interest or that curiosity, or they would like to ask some questions, and that's good. You know, it's good to meet, it's good to talk. Communication is key, people. Communication is key. Right. We were hearing on communication that on the way back. So we had gone down. It was also me and some of my close friends, Shaban. Those of you that know Shaban, Abu Mu'adh. I don't know if he's on. I'll check if he's online, if I can see his thing at the top. Qasim. And so on the way back, whilst listening to some, just on communication, I just remembered listening to Jaun Elia, Sahib, and some of his kind of poetry that he read out at his. But there's on communication, he speaks about this is the calamity of humanity since time immemorial. So he says from Neanderthal man. He actually says that in his event, Jaun Elia. He says Neanderthal man se shuru karte hue. That this whole that's human civilization has really just had one problem, and that is that nobody really listens. They don't really listen to what the other person is being said, and the other person doesn't truly say what they want to say. That this line of his, that ek hi hadsa to hai. He says ek hi hadsa to hai aur wo ye ke baat nahi kahi gayi, baat nahi suni gayi. And that this is the whole, that people just do not listen. What's this? For some reason I still can't open up the comments beyond the two lines. Bin tumhare kabhi nahi aayi, क्या मेरी नींद भी तुम्हारी है. वाह 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 वाह. So yeah, so I mean, communication is key, and it was good. I'll tell you what, whilst we were at the event, what's interesting, I'll share this. In between, quite early into the discussion, I was given some drink which turned out to be ginger beer. I did think I was trying to figure it out. It had a distinct kind of, I don't know whether it was mixed with something or it had a different kind of flavor to it. So I was trying to figure it out, and I said, "Oh, is this the camel urine?" And I was cracking some jokes, and I was just saying that, actually it's maybe it's an acquired, I could get used to this taste. And so anyway, whilst I was cracking some jokes, this one brother, he just says, sorry brother, I have to. He had I think he was Arab. Yeah, he had that kind of, definitely Middle Eastern. So he had that kind of Arab accent to his English, and he said, "Bro, I'm sorry, I have to say this, So I think Javed told him, look, we'll discuss the Q&A a little later on. We're just talking. And he said, no, I have to. I'm sorry. I have to say this. I'm sorry, but, and he stood up and he goes, you seem to be laughing. You said this hadith of the camel urine and you laughed. This, you make the mockery of our religion, And he said, you laugh at the sunnah. And so, and then he just started walking. And for a moment, no, I'm joking. He just kind of, he did walk down, and then he just wanted to leave. And he said, I'm sorry, I cannot take this that you laugh at the sunnah of the Prophet, So I said, and what sunnah would that be? And, drinking camel urine, is that the sunnah that you're speaking of? And so I said to him, look, if you care to sit, I'm happy to engage you on this discussion. I'm happy to have and he said, I'm sorry, brother. If I cannot, Allah says that do not sit with where they yastahzi'una bi ayat, where they mock the signs of God. I said, and is the camel urine a sign of God? Is this I said, and first of all, that's talking about the Quran, and this is not the Quran. And in Bukhari, I said this hadith of Anas. I said this hadith of Anas that you're referring to, Bukhari actually brings both versions. One, we're omitting this. So I said, look, if you want, I said you don't need to, but if you want to sit down, I'm happy to engage on a discussion on this. But he was like, no, obviously, how dare he sit with deviants who mock camel urine, for God's sake. I thought, wow, all right. Talk about taking the... He was basically saying you're taking the beep with camel beep. So it's quite an ironic statement right there. Right, so somebody saying, look, can you... All right, people, that's what I'm talking about. So that was an interesting thing. Somebody said that the Scots can't take a joke. No, I think generally people did have a reasonable sense of humor, and they did appreciate my jokes. I do have to remember sometimes that not all humans have been blessed with an equal sense of humor. as I'm often reminded. But nevertheless, somebody's asked, has Sheikh Yasir Qadi responded or replied? Not that I'm aware of. You're controversial. Hell yeah, Ziaul Haq al-Hashimi. Of course, controversy, I live the controversy. You know what I mean? I live. Now what to do? It's controversial. So what else is going on, people? People have submitted some questions. I should take some questions of people. Where is the element of adab? No lo sé. Right, what's going on here, people? Let's take some questions. So, Bir Viqar al-Aslam, who, by the way, is from Kashmir, doing awesome humanitarian work there. I mean, he's from there as well. Jammu, I don't know whether it's Jammu, but Indian occupied Kashmir, that side. And he's asking, are tattoos haram? I've answered this before in much detail. And I've explained that tattoos are not haram, although they may be discouraged. And I've got a much more detailed response on YouTube. If you just search it, it'll be much. I wouldn't do the whole topic justice by just uttering a few sentences. But in essence, you have to remember that tattoos are quite a modern phenomenon. Now, you have to bear with me when I say that, because I know tattoos have existed, you know, for potentially thousands of years, but it's not the way tattoos today are a modern phenomenon is that they are kind of a cosmetic accessory, if you like. So they are something done cosmetically, aesthetically. Allah, does it look like I'm cosmetically, aesthetically? Right, wrapping this out, am I? So this is something that was not done in the past, okay, generally speaking. So people would brand animals, they would kind of use tattoos on them and have as a branding per se. They would with their slaves, or sometimes to disfigure, or sometimes over the centuries it became like a tribal sign, if you like, and some women may add certain dots as tribal dots on their faces, and that continues till today. So these things, they have existed like that, but in recent times it's become quite, I mean, it still has that element, so you get a lot of gangs using tattoos as gang signs. You get a lot of disfigurement with tattoos as well, so people tattoo up their face to look very scary, and those things I would feel are haram. So I do feel, and I've said before, that those things are haram. However, general tattoos, like where people would, I don't know, have something, some kind of pattern or some kind of writing, or men or women, these in essence do not warrant any tahrim, because this whole phenomenon is modern. It didn't exist in the past like this. Like, people never used tattoos the way they are using them today. They did. So for this purpose, there isn't anything compelling to say it's haram, because it's not a disfigurement. And the hadith that people use about that the Prophet forbade and prohibited, you know, certain women that do certain things, you know, النامصات والمتنمصات, and the whole hadith والواشمات والمستومشات, and you know, it goes on and on and on and on. It mentions several these women, الواصلات والمستوصلات, that these women that will add hair extensions, that comes in the hadith, those women that pluck their eyebrows, those women that kind of they not what is it, they kind of file their teeth and stuff like this, and those that use tattoos. So in that hadith, which is in Sahih Bukhari and so on, and the Prophet is cursing them, this hadith does not mean that. And the reason we know it doesn't mean that is because many ulama, including the entire Maliki madhab, for example, said that women can pluck their eyebrows, they can do these things, there is no tahrim. And that hadith was referring to women in their iddah, in their mourning, and not as in the morning, like when they wake up. Can't have a tattoo right now, I've just woke up, for God's sake. I can have it in the evening, but mourning as in M-O-U-R-N, to mourn the dead. So there is an iddah period that is known as ihdad or hidad, and during that period, women tend to avoid any kind of adornment or any kind of makeup and things like this. So that was a kind of social, it had a social element to it as well. So many of the Malikiyah said it was referring to that. So Dardir and al-Adawi and all these other ulama write on, and Tusuqi and other people, they write about this in their texts. Also, Al-Qarafi speaks about this, the great scholar, about how to say tattoos are haram. Is he kind of problematizes the whole thing, saying that if you say it's changing the creation of God, then he said, then technically so are other things, and you can't seem to because he said if it's just for the purpose of, because if it's for the purpose of enhancement or beauty, then you can't say it's for making somebody ugly. And if you say, well, I know it's not making them ugly, but it's so let's say a woman had a tattoo of a rose or something like this. Now, I could say a man having a tattoo of that, which would be a whole different conversation. Right, but the important thing is, now let's say this tattoo. Now people would agree that this tattoo isn't to make her look ugly. They wouldn't think that it does make her look ugly. They wouldn't think that at all. In fact, most people may, or many people may find that attractive. But they may say, oh, well, this changes the creation of God. Using that verse, about the shaitan saying, وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ وَلَيُغَيِّرَنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ, I will command them and they will change the creation of God. That was changing it to a disfigurement. And the reason being, Qarafi argues that then how would you say about things like, for example, piercings, like women piercing their ears, or by extension, one could say body piercing, or Qarafi also highlights, how would you say about things like circumcision for men? Is circumcision not changing the creation of God? So, and if you are okay, then if you say, yeah, well, that's okay because, it's for, let's say, hygiene purposes. But the point is, it's still changing something. And he argues that, and if you say, well, earrings are okay because, they're for beauty, well, then the same argument would apply here. So I think that, and I've said these things before, that piercings and earrings and stuff like this are not haram for men or women. Although, obviously women always tend to, use things like have earrings or nose piercings and things like this. But men too do have this kind of stuff, and it's not haram. Are dreadlocks halal? I mean, are you going to eat them? Halal. Yes, you can. I mean, I don't really know too much about dreadlocks and how they. I mean, I know what dreadlocks are, but I don't know what would make it haram. What would make dreadlocks haram? I mean, unless you're going to say it's something to do with, I don't know how they're maintained and kept and what the hygiene and stuff like that. I don't know any of that. I'm assuming that all of those mechanisms are in place. I'm assuming people with dreadlocks must have hygiene mechanisms and stuff like this, and how they deal with them, I just do not know. But I'm sure if you Google it, it'll come up. Right, so is it haram? Alden Hash is asking to undergo transgender operation. Aiden? Latte. Are you speaking post-op? just so we know, that's all. Right, so somebody's asking, what's your beef with Joe Rogan? He's Oprah for men. I don't know if I have. I'll speak about Joe Rogan in a moment. I don't think I don't have any personal beef per se with Joe Rogan, but yeah. But I'll speak about that in a moment. Have you checked out Abu Ibrahim's Facebook comments on your response to his video? My video to Abu Ibrahim, aka Simran, the Exorcist. Alright. The Exorcist, right? So my video to him is quite old now. So as in earlier, was it late last year or early this year? It was, I made a video to him. His response to me was, what could it be? After quoting Da'if Hadith, is there anything left to say? He tried to correct me by using Da'if Hadith. So there's nothing more to say really. So his response was something like, I'm not going to bother responding to this guy. He's a waste of time or something. I was like, well, by all means, respond or don't. You mean very little to me in my world, mate. So it's all good. In the Mutah, is it haram to kiss a girl before marriage? Ibrahim Gayachung Kang is making some confessions. I have done astaghfir, toba, toba, toba. People, get him, chastise him. Are you trying to get? Are you asking, does Islam legitimize? You see, but I forget. Wait there, I've lost his name. Ibrahim Giachung Kang. Sorry, I don't know if I'm mispronouncing that, or is that a joke, or is that a real name, Giachung Kang? Is it? So if it is, let's roll with it. People don't always have legit names on Facebook. Ibrahim Giachung Kang says, I did it 2 years ago. You're counting the days. Yes, salam. Counting another day. You got like a tally chart. That must have been one hell of a kiss. If it left such an impression that that it's that 2 years later, Ibrahim Giaching Kang is still, he's like, yes. Well, you see, the thing is, Ibrahim, I think Islam, generally speaking, doesn't allow these things. I mean, I've discussed this in much detail. I've got a clip which is on YouTube called Relationships, Marriages and Zina. I think that's what it's titled. And then there's a bit more detail in the subtitle about the challenges surrounding these things within the modern day and age for Muslims and Islam as it is currently being presented. Okay, so now what I had said is that, truly speaking, there are some very tough challenges that modern day relationships present to Muslims, and I'm not really so sure we have, as currently speaking, a system that caters religion as a whole. I think religions all probably don't have solutions to. I think Islam, I'm not saying Islam doesn't have a solution necessarily, but I'm saying Islam, the way we know it today, doesn't necessarily, like other religions, present a solution either. So this is left as a challenge, and that is that how do we know the compatibility in relationships, especially in the modern day and age? Somebody just wrote gremlin kiss. What is a gremlin kiss? Everybody right now is probably Googling that, thanks to I can't read his name, it's in Chinese. My surname is named after a mountain. Gia Chung Kang is a mountain of a man, people. It's a hell of a mountain, that's what it is. So, well, awesome. Right, so coming back to this discussion, it truly is a difficult discussion, because how do you know compatibility? How do you know whether there's going to be personality compatibility? How do you know whether there's going to be compatibility on an intimacy level? Sexual compatibility? How do we know these things? And today, for time, people haven't known these things. But the problem is, today the mindset has changed. And once the mind changes, it's it's like it's like it's born. You see, so it's like a baby being born. Now, once the baby actually breathes oxygen, there's no going back. It doesn't, now it can't survive without oxygen. So once the mind kind of has this I don't know if you want to call it a realization or a thought that, look, I don't know, like, minds need to be the same, or I need this to be the same, or what is their personality. Once there has been this mind shift, the mind doesn't go back to just simple lifestyles of it doesn't matter. Like, well, I'm man, cousin, man, woman, family. It just doesn't quite cut it anymore. So people are now much more concerned about these other boxes and areas that they want to tick off. That is there some compatibility, is there, and what about intimacy or sexual compatibility, or even just on these little things as our brother Ibrahim was much concerned with, kissing or any of these things. I mean, how would you know whether there is compatibility or there isn't? Because not all things, not all people, not all experiences will be felt the same. And so, is there a solution? Currently, as generally religions are being presented, there doesn't seem to be a solution. Somebody said, what about mut'ah? Well, I mean, okay, in Shia Islam that does exist. And in Sunni Islam, I think the concept does exist. I think mut'ah is not haram. Contrary to popular opinion, but the great Maliki scholar Ibn Ashur and other people have highlighted that it's not haram. However, sorry, I just thought, but however, but maybe, but nobody, scholars are not dealing with these challenges. Everybody's just saying, tough luck, just put up with it. And so I don't know, maybe if people rose to these kind of discussions, to these challenges, in general, it doesn't just have to be about relationships, but this is a key thing. What are your views on some Muslims getting married in church because of his foreigners' wives? Ahmed Weiss, because of his foreign wives. All on the same day. All of them, lining them up. And the priest says, in unison, please, we do. He says, I do. And they say, we do. We do as well. También, también. Right, so what is the difference between Mutah and Misyar? I've covered this before. My wife had very hairy legs. I seriously considered divorce. Really hairy. It's got like this all over the... Yeah. Today we have made... She had seriously hairy legs. Would you mind? Would you pass me the brush? I need to brush my... Oh, god damn, everybody's just picturing now what seriously hairy legs must be like on a woman. That's like, what the hell? What the hell is going on? Well, she needed some serious hair elimination, waxing, I suppose, or I don't know, whatever, at an industrial scale, I guess. Well, look, the truth is that these things, I'm sure they are very bothersome. I'm sure they are. I'm sure if you're like, you're right, bro. Bro, you want to go to the gym later on and spot me? If you start referring to your wife as bro, then you gotta fist. Oh, oh god, that would be really like an awkward, really hairy, like more hairy, than like all your regular friends. But I think that, look, people need to work on these things. They need to understand that aesthetics is important in a relationship. Looking good is important, of course, undeniably. And I think most people, I don't know if this will come across, people might say sexist or not, I don't know whether it comes across, but men are incredibly visual. So especially when it comes to sexual kind of that angle, so they're very visual. So I think the sight of hairy the sight of that would be quite so I think people can work on these things. They can and other things, whatever's bothering people in a relationship. Likewise, Amy said women are visual too. I mean, they are absolutely. I mean, women are not blind either. So, you know, if a guy is completely out of shape or just sitting there like pot belly and just, you know, I'm sure that is not a sight for sore eyes. It's not the kind of thing you want to really take a look at and think, oh God, what the hell happened to you? It's like, so I think people need to work on themselves to always keep themselves in good, and look, and remember this, by keeping yourself always presentable or trying to keep in good shape, or trying to keep, you will feel better. You will actually be rewarding yourself. Mogul said divorce due to follicular incompatibility, that she's got way too many follicles. And he hasn't got enough on his head. He's like, well, if we take those hair follicles, can you just take them and just plant them onto my head? The hospital are like, what? So everybody keep yourself. Yeah, I think absolutely people should always take whatever they're into, you know, whether it's just general health, whether it's and it doesn't have to be things like you have to be like pumping weight. It could just be people are into cycling, jogging, anything, you know, just keeping healthy, and it rewards you as the individual. You think positively, you're actually happy a lot of the time, and so if anything, you owe it to yourself. Yeah, and I think Muslims have this, you know, it's like somebody told me, I heard this, I mean, the person who said to somebody else, but I heard this recently, that a person said, well, oh, you know, one guy said to the other, whoa, they haven't met for a considerable while. And he said, whoa, are you been, what the hell happened to you? The guy's like pot belly, you know, like, oh, disheveled, just looking a mess. As in, I'm not saying he looks like he's homeless, but he just looks like he can't be bothered. And he said, yeah, what? And he said, well, I'm married. I've been married for several years. What do I need to do now? Like, why do I need to, you know, basically, it's not like I'm trying to pull women. This was his kind of response. And I think that is a very disappointing response. Highly embarrassing. It is nothing but just, you know, asking for, like, it's a very pitiful response. What does that mean? That, oh, if a person is looking, first of all, you owe it to yourself, then you owe it to, let's say, your partner, you owe it to other people. Just take care of yourself. And there's a hadith, a beautiful hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ said that Inna Allah yuhibbu an yara athara ni'matihi ala abdi, that Allah loves to see the blessings that He has given to His servant, man or woman, visual upon them, apparent on them. So He likes to see that they are taking care of themselves, they are wearing good clothes, they are wearing, whether it's jewelry or whatever they want. But the point is that He wants to see the blessings that He's bestowed upon them. Right, John Snow is asking, and so many, do al-Azhar scholars have isnad? For God's sake, we're having such a conversation here about relationships, and Jon Snow's like, but no, do the al-Azhar scholars have isnad, or have I been betrayed? Jon Snow, relax yourself. I'm sure some of them do and some of them don't. There you go. Al-ghuslu amana bayna abdi wa rabbik. Huh? Al-ghuslu. What does that even mean? That taking a bath is an amana, a trust between the servant and his Lord. I've got no idea. Muhammad Zahir Wani, whatever it is you're smoking or drinking, maybe you want to share it. Ayub, what should scholars do to provide an answer to relationships? Well, they need to have a bit of courage, and they need to start thinking out of the box as well. Views on interracial marriages and cultural restrictions. Interracial marriages and cultural restrictions. Maybe link this with problematic. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I don't think there isn't, in my understanding, there's no problem in interracial or, you know, marriages or relationships or intercultural and intercultural as well. I think it just depends on the people. If people like each other and if they feel things can work, then it's worth a shot. It may not work. But then, you know, I mean, a lot of things. I remember has it been a few years now? 2 years, couple of years? Maybe it's been about 2 years or 3 years. I remember I was called to an event in not Amsterdam, but in the Netherlands. I think it was in Rotterdam. And so we went to this event, and at the event, we were speaking about loads of things, and there was also a few other speakers and scholars there, and right, and there was also another British Mufti as well. You probably know Mufti Mangera, Abdurrahman Mangera, and he was there as well, and there was some other people as well, and then there was a Q&A, and one of the questions that was presented to Mufti Mangera Saab was that would you recommend that people that in the Netherlands they have a mixed community of like Turks and Arabs, maybe North Africans and North African Arabs maybe, and other people too, but would you recommend a kind of people being from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and intermarrying? Would you recommend that? So I was really surprised to hear at the time Mufti Mangera, because that was pointed at him, the question was not at me, and he said, well, no, I would advise against these things. And he gave his opinion, and his opinion was because, you know, cultures are not just two individuals, they are families marrying into each other. And that, you know, he gave his own experience, and he said, well, how does he said, well, him and his own wife and how she communicates with his family and stuff, and that wouldn't have been possible unless they knew the same language and they were from the same culture. And he gave some examples, and I was really disappointed. I'm gonna be honest, I was really disappointed by that response. And I actually, even though it's just one question to one scholar, and then there were different questions, so there were different questions, I actually insisted and said, no, can I take the mic? And I said, throw me the mic, people, throw me the mic. I'm not just going to sit back and, I'm sorry, that, I said, so I asked that, can I have the mic? I need to say something on that. I can't stay silent on these things. This is the problem. So I said, no, I need to say something. And I said, look, I'd like to follow up. I respect the Mufti Saab. However, I said that is wrong as far as I'm concerned. As far as I'm concerned, that look, people, your cultures do not define you. They definitely may define you as a person, but they do not define your relationship. And it is true that, yes, there may be cultural barriers, but if a couple feel that they can get through something, then it is their choice. If they want to do something, they should, why not encourage them? Why discourage them? Why dissuade them just because it doesn't work for you? And that too in the name of religion. Like, I think that's wrong, because it's up to them. You know, if they want to do it, if they feel they can do it by all means. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it works, it works. Alhamdulillah. I said, look, there's many people who are so from the same culture, same extended family, same clan. In Asian families, some are even cousins. They might as well be brother and sister. Some are even, you know, in some of these arranged marriages, you get, especially in Pakistan, they'll be cousins as well. And yet the marriage will still fall apart. Naturally. I mean, it'll be like a spitting image of you. It'll just be like I'm looking into the mirror now and I'm seeing me with just long hair. I go, oh, Mufti. Oh, no, sorry. Wife, I mean. And then all the kids naturally have to be spitting images. Right, so now I'm cracking some jokes. Right, so the point is that what I said is you'll get people from the same background and their relationships too may fall apart. So it's not necessary just because you're from a different background your relationship won't work. That is not a necessary contingent. That's what I'm saying. Right, so Arabs do marry cousins. No, I'm sure they do as well. But I think Pakistanis just need to kind of branch out a bit, man, for God's sake. I totally, you know, I think these cousin marriages are just like, what the... Okay, let's play brother, sister, brother, sister. No, because in a lot of them, they used to call each other brother, sister before. That's my brother, that's my sister. Oh, tomorrow we're getting married. I don't know. But I suppose what's happened has happened. I'm cracking jokes. This isn't to... If anybody is in one of those marriages, this isn't to offend you, okay? Don't worry about it, huh? Don't worry about it. Keep it in the family. That's what I'm talking. No, I'm joking. It's all good, it's all good. Right, so what else is going on? A Sajud joiner. Alright, people tuning in, click like, click share, people. Show people as an act of rebellion. You know, somebody said, oh, some people wanted to come to, like when I was at the Glasgow thing, or at other places, but they're worried what other people will say. You know, Mufti Abu Layth. Mufti Abu Layth. You got that deviant. Marga Altaf is asking, is Makkah commercialized? I mean, of course. Hell yeah. Desi family rivalries cause so many problems. Hell yeah. Find a second wife out of the family. Frody Frubry is saying. Well, that's going to bring the first relationship to an end. Makkah is definitely commercialized. I think the whole world probably is. Look, Makkah... Let me tell you something I once heard from one of my teachers about Imam Abu Hanifa. That he was asked that, look, why don't you go and live in Makkah? Because, you know, such a great scholar. The whole world is... At some point, people are coming to Makkah. They will find you there. They will benefit from you. They will... Why don't you move to Makkah? Kufa is not the place. So his response was that, look, I would rather live in Kufa, but have the love and sanctity of Makkah and the longing for Makkah in my heart, rather than live in Makkah and simply just long for Kufa in my heart. Which is so true, because look, you have to remember, human beings, by our very nature, we become desensitized. So if we are constant exposure to something, desensitizes us. Now, you know, if I would never, I'll be honest with you, I would never want to live in Makkah or Medina, just because of the kind of sanctity that I want the cities to have in my heart. Like, I know me living there, Toba, Toba, Toba. काबा किस मुंह से जाओगे गालिब, शर्म तुमको मगर नहीं आती. That, you know, I couldn't live in a sacred place like that. I mean, I'm not worthy of places like that. So the truth is that, look, if I lived in a place like Mecca or Medina, and the you know, the my kind of see, just my mind my mind is too, you know, if you look into my mind, it's like, I don't know, like, even it's so, there's so many, I mean, age restriction is so high as it is to just look into my mind. Life would never, if you looked into my mind, there would be things you just could not unlearn. You'd be like, how do I unlearn that? It's so this, you see, the sanctity would go naturally because you'd become desensitized and you're a normal human being at the end of the day. And you'd want to do things like if they had a cinema. Look, somebody's saying if they had a cinema in Makkah, but let's be honest, I'd want to watch TV. Why wouldn't I want to watch TV? I watch TV. I mean, so if I was in Makkah, you think I wouldn't watch TV? You think I wouldn't get up to the normal stuff that you get up to? You think, like, you wouldn't, so, and then you'd be doing that in Makkah, and then you'd be doing that in Medina, and then they'll just become normal places, like they are for the people that live there. And then, because everybody's then just worried about regular life, and you're worried about how do I earn a living, and, you know, business, and should I open a shop, or should I run a hotel, or should I do this, or should I do that? And then it's just dealing with public and frustration and money, and it'll just be like life anywhere else except you're in Makkah, and then Makkah becomes commercialized by extension. I'm not saying that the commercial amenities are a bad thing, because when people go there, I'm sure they appreciate the commercial amenities. I'm sure they do. The clock tower, is heartbreaking. It's very disappointing. I mean, it's there now, alhamdulillah. It's just disappointing to me as an individual to see that the Saudis felt they needed a landmark in Mecca other than the Kaaba. I mean, why would you need a landmark in front of the Kaaba when that is the landmark? You understand? And so, but khair, I mean, I'm not trying to judge people. I'm just trying to say it's disappointing a bit. But that said, it is the way of the world. But the clock tower is also a hotel. Fair enough. I mean, it is a hotel. I get that. And I'm just saying that the way they made it to kind of be the tallest building there was around there, and to kind of, I don't know, just out of tradition, I felt that, you know, look, like, you know, like, cities can have their kind of traditions. There's nothing wrong in that, you know, that the minarets of the Kaaba are the tallest thing in that surrounding. There's nothing wrong in that. Let's take Birmingham as an example. I mean, or any city within the UK. I mean, if you wanted to build something, you have to take council permission, and the council construction permission usually has to look at what you're building. Does it harmonize with its surroundings? And so if you're building a particular building or a certain house or certain things, that it must in some extent harmonize. It can't be absolutely shockingly kind of an anomaly. It can't. So councils have their rules and places have their rules, and I think there's no harm in Makkah having its rule that, you know, that the buildings, because you can make multiple buildings, that the minarets of the Kaaba should be the tallest. That's just out of a sanctity and respect. But khair, I mean, the minarets, I understand that they just have been made later on. They weren't there in the time of the Prophet. I get that. But cool. So should non-Muslims be allowed into the Haramain? I believe that non-Muslims can go. to, you know, although today they can't go. Although today they can't, even if they wanted to, because of Saudi restrictions. But I believe that Islamically speaking they could, and the verse of the Quran, فَلَا يَقْرَبُ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامَ بَعْدَ عَامِهِمْ هَذَا, that إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ النَّجَسِ, was more about what they were doing in the Kaaba was najas, was impure, meaning, and it was a symbolic impurity. It was simply speaking about them, the idol worship, and because it was something that they were so used to coming to and worshipping. If they came at that time, the force of habit is so strong that they may just come there and just try to constantly keep bringing idols and doing things. Therefore, Allah had placed this restriction. Otherwise, there were non-Muslims in the Prophet's mosque. The Prophet, in fact, the Christians that came from Najran, that came to visit the Prophet, were given an area to pray in the Prophet's mosque. So that was in the masjid of the Prophet, which according to Malikis and myself and Imam Malik is more virtuous than the Kaaba. Like, we believe that Imam Malik's madhab was that Medina is more virtuous, afdal min Makkah. Although majority of Muslims don't agree with that point, but the Malikis and Imam Malik, and I am Maliki in that sense, that Medina and the Prophet's mosque is more virtuous than Makkah, the Kaaba. So in the Prophet's mosque, non-Muslims were there. They were even worshipping there by authorization of the Prophet. Now, I'm not saying they need to go worship today, but what I'm trying to say is them visiting, although today so many Muslims are going and there's such a high demand, I can understand that. How would you accommodate? But I don't think it's a theological issue. I could understand it's one of logistics and things like that. Saad, please don't be sad. We all like a response. What is Saad's question? Please respond. Please respond. What's your opinion on the death of Sulaiman and his death, and for how long were the jinns? I can't see the remaining part of that question. The death of Sulaiman alayhi salam, I'll go into that into some detail, inshallah, if I can next week, just to bring you a more comprehensive kind of outlook. It is interesting that, you see, Sulaiman alayhi salam, it's interesting, you know, when we look at the Quran, we don't really take certain things into consideration. Because when you look at Sulaiman alayhi salam's lifestyle, now the Quran speaks about Sulaiman and having made for him, as part of his prestige, was he would have great statues. Tamathil, the Quran mentions that he would have great statues erected, and some people feel they were his statues of him, and some people feel, okay, maybe statues of other people. And it's interesting how we've gone from, you know, obviously today most Muslim, or many Muslims, can't tolerate anything like a statue or an iconic figure, and they feel everything is categorically haram, haram, haram. Figurines are haram, statues are haram, images are haram. And yet here is a prophet of God, Prophet Solomon, who has huge statues built for his court. And that's just unnecessary. Like, you don't even need statues in a court. But yet he had this as part of his kind of majesty. And I think that's amazing, and that we don't reflect, and that's mentioned in the Quran. You know, وَتَمَاثِيلَ وَقُدُورٌ رَاسِيَاتٍ, and he had these big, and that's all kind of describing his glory and majesty and his kind of sovereign rule and stuff like this. But I'll go through that inshallah in more detail, because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings surrounding Sulaiman alayhi salam. So I'll cover that in detail, about things like people feel that he could speak to ants and stuff like that. That's not true. And it didn't mean that, you know, the verse about the ant and stuff like this. And I'll go through the different definitions of what that means, the general understandings of that. That was more either a vision being shown onto him, or it was a depiction. It wasn't a real, like how people are imagining today. And people think Sulaiman alayhi salam used to fly in the clouds, and he used to have like a throne that flies around. That's not true. None of that is true. And they misuse certain verses of the Quran, that the winds would blow him to the east and the winds would blow him. And they think that that's the winds would blow him, as in he would just float around like this and he would fly over Iran, Persia, and he'd fly over this and he'd fly. That's absolutely nonsensical. Not true at all. Nothing like that. And people feel that he could understand, like he had like let's say animals when they're talking. Animals don't talk like that, but I mean, like he could understand their speech, as in like, and that's not true. And the Quran doesn't actually say that, but that he could communicate with certain like animals, like birds. But like you have even people do that even today. They do communicate, whisper and stuff. But I'll go through Sulaiman alayhi salam because he's a very interesting example of how misunderstandings occur. I'll do that next week, inshallah. Right, so can I sit in the car and pray, or should I join the Jama'ah in the nearest car park? Sit in the car and pray. What is that about? Sit in the car and pray. You shouldn't. I don't believe you can sit down and pray unless you can't stand. If you can stand, you must stand. What do you think of Muhammad Iqbal? Which Muhammad Iqbal are we talking about? Are we talking about Allama Iqbal? Or are we talking about Sidi Iqbal from one of my teachers from Birmingham? I'm not sure who you mean. What about the throne of Saba being of the Queen of Sheba? You mean being brought to his court, Sulaiman alayhi salam? I'll discuss that as well. What did that mean, and what most likely would that be referring to? Okay, so I'll do all of that. I don't think it was like how people. It definitely wasn't how people think anyway. Like they think a throne appeared. Or was it even her throne is another interesting question. So, and what actually happened, I'll go through that inshallah next week. Can we go back to the Shadi talk? Right, Allama Iqbal is an amazing, legendary Muslim thinker of the 19th and 20th century, an amazing person. I think people should read up on him. He was very revolutionary, very critical thought, open-minded, and he kind of envisaged some of I think he conceptualized some of the challenges of his age. One of the things he kind of spoke out against was this messianic vision. He said that Muslims seem to have fallen back on a messianic vision, and they feel that they are awaiting a Messiah. So one of the things that Muhammad Iqbal, Allama Iqbal, spoke of was that there is no Messiah to come, that Jesus is not coming back, neither is there a Mahdi. And he then, spoke about this in some of his letters and things like this, and then people asked him to substantiate what he was saying. So he reached out to a very well-grounded scholar, Allama Tamanna Imadi, an amazing, with somebody with profound knowledge from the Indian subcontinent, who then wrote a whole book, a detailed book, on why there is no second coming of Jesus and stuff like that. And he writes in the introduction, I've written this at the request of Allama Iqbal, who's asked me to do so. Right, okay. Shok manzil na kar kabul, Allama Iqbal. Have you heard of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's Shikwa and Jawab-e-Shikwa? Of course, Shikwa and Jawab-e-Shikwa they are the poems of Allama Iqbal, who speaks about the frustration Muslims are going through, and they're kind of complaining to God. And they're telling God that, what the hell is happening? And then people called him a kafir, so he wrote the Jawab-e-Shikwa, which is the response. What was the book called? Which book? The book again that there is no second coming. The exact title, I know it's to do with that there is no Nuzul-e-Masih, but it's in Urdu. If you just simply write Nuzul Isa or Nuzul Isa Allama Tamanna Imadi, it does come up, but it is in Urdu. It's a very detailed book. Is every hadith book wijada, so they are weak? That's interesting. Is every hadith book wijada? I think this is the point that Sheikh Atabek was raising, that every hadith book today is wijada. That's interesting. I mean, wijada means that it isn't, it's kind of, you're just picking it up and teaching it. Although we do have also a continuous, people have been, we do have isnad going back in hadith, but it could be questioned that was each hadith actually taught, or did people just pass on ijaza? I mean, if we're gonna heighten the critical scrutiny, then you're right, it may be difficult to find, it may appear that hadith books are wijada. That may be the case. In fact, there's something I was, a brief book here actually, I was looking at. This is by Ibn al-Athir. You can't really see much of it there. It's a book on al-Qawl al-Jamil fi ilm al-Jarh wa al-Ta'dil. And it had some interesting points on hadith and stuff like this. But I mean, this was actually, although it's not directly linked to, although he does go through that discussion as well, but this is much before. Today I think definitely Sheikh Atabek on his point of all hadith being wijada, I think that's what he's saying is quite, it's a compelling discussion, very thought-provoking. I'm not sure. Allama, somebody, Samir has written something, I can't read it. This had some interesting discussions on how people made up hadith. Here, I'll go through some, this is by Ibn al-Athir. So, for example, sometimes people made up hadith, so they could, he says about making up hadith, وَمِنْهُمْ قَوْمٌ وَضَعُوا الْحَدِيث. So some people did it so they could just for desires and things like this. So for example, some of the Khawarij would say that فَإِنَّا كُنَّا إِذَا هَوَيْنَا أَمْرًا سَيَّرْنَاهُ حَدِيثًا. So in the Khawarij, some of them said if we wanted something, we would just turn it into a hadith. وقال أبو العيناء وضعت أنا والجاحظ حديث فدك وأدخلناه على الشيوخ ببغداد فقبلوه إلا ابن شيبة العلوي فإنه قال that he said لا يشبه آخر هذا الحديث أوله وأبى أن يقبله. So Abu al-Ayna, him and Jahid say they made up a hadith of the Fadak, and they kind of obviously made up the chain as well and made it look legit, and then told the scholars in Baghdad about it, and almost every scholar accepted it as a valid hadith except this particular scholar Ibn Sheba al-Alawi, who kind of problematized it. قال Sulaiman ibn Harb دخلت على شيخ وهو يبكي. So Sulaiman ibn Harb says, I went to a scholar who was crying. فقلت له ما يبكيك. I said to him, what makes you cry? قال وضعت 400 حديث وأدخلتها في برنامج الناس. He said, I fabricated myself 400 hadith and I placed them into the baramij, were what today means program in Arabic, barnamij, but actually baramij, and which is plural of barnamij, was to do with their books of giving ijaza for hadith and stuff like this, and what a person's personal index is. فلا أدري كيف أصنع. So he says, I don't know what to do now. ومنهم جماعة وضعوا الحديث حسبة. So some people did it so they could, for accountability, so they could call people to do good things. So for example, Abu Isma Nuh ibn Abi Maryam al-Marwazi, he said, and Muhammad ibn Ukash al-Kirmani wa Ahmad ibn Abdullah you've got here al-Juwaybari wa ghayruhum. So these people and there's also people like Abdul Karim ibn Abil Awja. Now these people, they said they would make hadith so people could do good things. وقيل لأبي عيسمة من أين لك أن عكرمة عن ابن عباس في فضائل القرآن. So you can see when he would make it up, he would fabricate a chain. So you'd say, I heard from Ikramah, from Ibn Abbas about the virtue of the Quran, that such and such surah has such a virtue. وَلَيْسَ عِنْدَ أَصْحَابِ عِكْرَمَةَ هَذَا. So somebody said, how do you know this? And none of the people who were around Ikramah knew this. فقال إني رأيت الناس قد أعرضوا عن القرآن واشتغلوا بفقه أبي حنيفة ومغازي محمد بن إسحاق فوضعت هذا الحديث حسبة. So he says that I saw a lot of people get fascinated by fiqh of Abu Hanifa and other people, and they turned away from the Quran. So I fabricated these hadith to bring people back to the Quran. And actually, as a rule, most hadith to do with the virtues of surahs of the Quran. So for example, Surah Yasin has this virtue, Surah this has this virtue. Most, not all, but most hadith like that are usually always made up as a rule. وَمِنْهُمْ جَمَاعَةً وَضَعُوا الْحَدِيث تَقَرُّبًا لِلْمُلُوكِ. And some of them, like Ghiyath ibn Ibrahim, they made up hadith to get closer to kings. Like he went to Mahdi ibn Mansur, who's was the caliph at the time. وَكَانَ يُعْجِبُ الْحَمَامِ الطَّيَّارِ. And he was playing with pigeons and doves and things like that. And so he just said a hadith. And in that hadith, he's saying that there's no, for example, that you wouldn't kind of have these kind of competitions where you bet or whatever, but he includes birds in there and in the hadith. Like the hadith is really just to do with like let's say horses and stuff like this, but he includes that in there because he realizes the king is fond of birds. So he told him, he gifted him when he heard that. Oh wow, he gave him like 10,000 dirhams. But then he said to him that he realized basically that he had lied and stuff like this, and then he was kind of really hurt that you lied against the Prophet and made up a hadith because of these doves or these birds, and he's kind of really disheartened by that. But you get other examples as well, like somebody who said قيل لمعمون بن أحمد المروزي ألا ترى إلى الشافعي وإلى من نبغ من خراسان. So فقال, somebody had praised like Imam Shafi'i, and like this is in praise of Imam Shafi'i. So somebody came out with a chain and he said فقال حدثنا أحمد بن عبيد الله حدثنا عبيد الله بن معدان الأزدي عن أنس رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله. That he narrates a full chain and says the Prophet said يكون في أمتي رجل يقال له أبو محمد بن إدريس يقال له محمد بن إدريس. So this person, now there's some to praise, but this person actually said it against Shafi'i because he heard all these people kind of praising and things like this and dissing the Hanafi madhab. So he said that the Prophet said there will be a person in my ummah called Muhammad ibn Idris, أضر على أمتي من إبليس, that he will be more harmful than Iblis. ويكون في أمتي رجل, there will be a man in my ummah يقال له أبو حنيفة, he is called Abu Hanifa, هو سراج أمتي, he is the lamp of my ummah. So that's amazing, you get these kind of and there's other examples as well, and this kind of goes, it's an interesting small, it's not a big, very brief kind of book by Ibn al-Athir about Jarh wa Ta'dil, just something I was looking at. Right, Adhad ala ummati Adhad, yeah, this riwayah says Adar, but I think there's other maybe riwayat as well. Right, so, but they're fabricated, right? What are some other questions? Let's take some questions, people. Or shall I go through, I'll tell you what, let's go through this Joe Rogan thing and then I'll take some questions. So basically, look, somebody sent me a link to Joe Rogan's show called The Dangers of So The Dangers of Islam. Now, yep, Joe Rogan it is, yeah? Am I? And let me just see if I can bring up the. Just gonna bring this up one moment. And there was cool, right? So Joe Rogan, I think this is from maybe last year or so. He did this talk. Somebody sent it to me. Said, "Look, I don't know if you want to watch this," and so I did, and I was really disappointed. Now I've heard of Joe Rogan, but I've never really watched much of his stuff. This particular podcast that I did listen to, I was really disappointed by it. He had this guest on there called Gad Saad. So, and this guy Gad Saad, oh my God, his views, I don't know, the way he was expressing them were abysmal. I mean, they were catastrophic. That's what they were, and I just found them appalling. The whole discussion I found overall very disappointing. And it was really about the fear of Islamizing the West. And Joe Rogan kind of begins and he goes off and he speaks about how today, like how people are shying away from having a conversation about this. And what the conversation ought to be about is the fear, which he feels is the rightly so, that the justified fear of Islam in the West. That we ought to be very afraid of Islam. And I just found it so hypocritical, the whole discussion, the whole, and his guest. I did share the link as well. Now, I'd never heard of this guy before, Gad Saad, but I heard this discussion of his. He's a Lebanese Jew. I don't know, he still identifies as a Jew, although not religiously, I think, or generally speaking. So the gist of what they were saying, so I'll give you the gist and I'll go through some key issues they highlight. So the gist of what they're saying is that, look, Islam is a threat inherently to the world and definitely to the West. And people are being too soft on Islam. And Joe Rogan pretty much, was also echoing that narrative. I mean, the Gad Saad guy was 100% spewing nothing but anti-Islamophobic, racist, and just kind of like prejudiced hatred. That's all he was doing for that whole half an hour. And Joe Rogan pretty much was agreeing with him right throughout, and maybe questions one or two elements that he disagrees on slightly, but pretty much agrees that Islam is definitely a threat, that we are misunderstanding people who say that no, we should differentiate and you got to stop being harsh and you got to stop doing this, that they're just being too soft, and these leftists and these academics that are kind of condemning or criticizing Sam Harris for speaking against Muslims, that they just kind of hypocrites themselves and stuff like this. This was the kind of gist of what he was going through. And Sam Harris, they bring up Sam Harris in the discussion earlier on, saying that, look, now I'd like to say that, look, I personally do feel, I feel that when it comes to people like Sam Harris, I think, you see, this is me, I feel that he has kind of taken a bit of a turn a few years ago. I could be wrong, but I've heard a lot of things of Sam Harris, and I must say there's a lot of things I like about Sam Harris, and there's some things that I abhor, I hate, and but this, I feel, I could be wrong, is more so in the last few years. He seems to have taken a kind of very bitter, almost like a burnt out, hateful kind of angle towards Muslims recently. He definitely seems to sound like, almost like he's from the far right when it comes to Muslims, but not so much in his older kind of talks. So if you watch his stuff on YouTube, stuff from, I don't know, let's say you go several years back, that when even then he was against Islam, he was against religions as a whole, he was against Christianity, and he would mock and he would ridicule, and he's a witty guy, he's very funny, he's very sophisticated, incredibly intelligent, and there's no doubting he's a genius. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that for a second, and I think he has very compelling arguments for things like atheism when he's arguing. He's I would say, a very incredibly tough opponent to kind of deal with in debates. That is unquestionable. But if you listen to his earlier lectures, he dismissed Islam and he said it was false, and as he did with other religions, but he wasn't kind of burnt out, like so bitter. He was just like, oh, he would ridicule aspects and he would do this and that, and that's fine. But in the last few years, he's become so, like, I don't know, to the extent his discussion of it's an option to nuke to nuke certain Muslim countries. I think, like, what the hell is he on about? What the hell are these people on about? And I love the fact that that Chomsky kind of really had a go at him as well, and that was the whole thing was online. It went back and forth between Chomsky and Sam Harris. But I just wanted to say that otherwise I'm not, I'm not like some of these people that will just dismiss things. So Sam Harris, when he said things that were solid, even though they were against religion, I have given him credit for that. I have said that, he's a genius, and I can acknowledge that, look, he makes compelling arguments and he does things, and he could speak with some objectivity. But in the last few years, he seems to have become just, I feel like, overwhelmed with hate. Whereas it's interesting because I see Dawkins almost the other way. I see that some of his earlier stuff is more bitter, and his recent stuff with Dawkins seems to be a lot more objective. I don't know. I mean, this is my personal impression. But coming back to this discussion, what they were trying to say, so they repeat throughout this dialogue on several occasions, look, Muslims are good people. So they say 99% of Muslims, I'm just quoting their podcast, both Joe Rogan and Gadsad say that, look, 99% of Muslims are just good people. But Islam is evil, evil, evil. But Muslims find 99% of them are good people. However, they highlight things like, one of the first things that Joe Rogan says is that, the Islam, when you look at it throughout the world, it is testament that it is oppressing people. It is in so many countries, over 50 countries in the world, and it's oppressing women. It's oppressing, it's a very oppressive kind of ideology. So it needs to be taken seriously. I mean, I would like to ask, like, wait a minute. What are we exactly talking about here? Because I can understand culture. I can understand there's certain countries that have very oppressive, culturally kind of oppressive things going on. But let's just be real. To say this is Islam, wherever it's found, you see a violation of human rights, that's not true. Doesn't China have an abhorrent record on human rights? We don't see you speaking out against China. I mean, it's not the number one threat all of a sudden. Russia has what is deemed internationally just a casual observance of human rights. It can openly challenge. Russia challenges the human rights courts. It challenges certain things. The whole, but yet there's no issues when it comes to Russia because everybody's afraid of Russia. Russia can shoot down a plane, killing almost 300 passengers as it flew over Ukraine. But yet they describe the process as, this is in their words, a complicated legal process in trying to do something with Russia. But if it's a Muslim country and there's human rights involved, it's just Islam and it must just be Islam and everything is so evil. And I'm not saying that those things ain't wrong, but what I'm trying to say is, why the double standards? Women, they say women. Take Asia, one of the largest, populations in the world. India is the rape capital of Asia. Over statistically 106, statistically anything between 90 something to 106 women are raped daily in India. That's what their statistics showed. I mean, that's not just like, you need to oppressing them as in cover up and think. That's raping them. Where is yet that's not said, this is due to a fundamental inherent problem with Hinduism. And I don't believe it's a problem of Hinduism. I believe it's a problem of the people. But yet, there's something's happening in Sudan. It's a problem with Muslims. No, sorry, it's a problem with Islam. Something has happened in Afghanistan. Something's happening in China. It's not a problem of their, whether it's Taoism or whatever. It's not a problem. Something's happening in India. It's not a problem of Hinduism, per se. Even though one could argue that Hinduism gives, it speaks of certain things. It doesn't say that you can do these atrocities to women, but it gives people places in society. It makes certain people untouchables. It makes certain, and that could contribute to that kind of sentiment, one could argue. But no, and I agree that it's not the religion at fault. But what I'm saying is, this whole talk just went on bashing Islam, saying that, Islam is this because, and Gad Saad said, look, wherever you find Islam is, he said, I think I put his quote down somewhere. He said that, I can't see. But he said, Islam does not make a good neighbor. This is what he had said. That Islam does not make a good neighbor. That was his kind of quote. Because he said, wherever there is Islam, he said Islam has problems with Buddhists. Islam has problems with Jews. Islam has problems. Now the question is this, that look, when we look at these things, Islam is not a person. Okay, to constantly say Islam does not make this, what you mean is Muslims. And yes, there are, he quotes 56 countries in the OIC. Now, 56 countries is a huge representation of the globe. I mean, it is a significant representation. So wherever you will find people, you will find problems. So when you have less people, they will less so represent the problems. And so you couldn't expect, naturally, if I get a tiny portion of people in the globe and I say, there aren't so many problems coming from a particular, like let's say Sikhs as an example, one could say, the Sikh faith hasn't caused so many problems and so on. I know some people could question that in terms of, but my point isn't to problematize. I'm just saying somebody could say, look, the Sikh faith hasn't done this or done that or done whatever. But then the Sikh proportionality is so small in the world. And here you've got 56 countries in the world that are Muslim. So wherever there's people, there's problems. Now those problems are not universal throughout Muslims, but you may find certain things happening in Afghanistan. And he said Buddhist, and I couldn't believe the audacity. I mean, Myanmar, the whole Rohingya crisis that the Globe picked up on, it was in the BBC, the US state declared it a genocide, that it was a genocide in place, that's what was taking. And it was described as a textbook genocide of the Rohingya Muslims. Yet that isn't, so when I heard this, I was quite kind of upset that what seems to be happening appears as though it's a very professional or kind of semi-professional, very objective discussion. And it was just a pure onslaught, really, against Islam. And it was just shocking. And I thought, and one of the things they said, and I wanted to highlight this, they said that, look, And they repeated 99% of Muslims are always peace-loving and stuff like this. And they said there is no distinction between Islam and Islamism. And Islamism, in fact, this Gad Saad, his words were that moderate Islam is simply people who do not... Moderate Muslims are simply people who do not take their faith seriously. And radical Islam just means taking Islam seriously. And I thought, what a ridiculous statement to say. What does that even mean? How can, if Islam is a concept, right, let me get this right. If Islam is a concept that is lived, breathed, discussed by Muslims, and then you say 99% of Muslims are peaceful, that absolutely contradicts your first statement. Because the concept is only kept alive through the people. Muslims are the people. I mean, they are the people that have kept the discourse of Islam alive. So to say, well, no, but 99% of you are fine, but really Islam is the vile poison. This one problem, this one problem. But that doesn't make any sense. And then I understand this person, he spoke a bit about, he said, look, I was oppressed his family were oppressed in Lebanon. And he said, and constantly there was this, this hate rhetoric of saying, scaremongering, that, oh my God, within a few years, Europe is going to turn Islamic. And America is going to become Islamic. What a stupid, I'm like, oh my, that was so hilarious to just listen to. That America is going to become Islamic. And he said that things don't turn, they don't happen overnight, he said Egypt was once Egypt was once non-Muslim, I thought, well, have you even studied any history? If you're talking about the conquests or the liberation of Egypt, in the time of the companions of the Prophet, when Islam was expanding, in that stage, if that's what you're talking about, then yes, that occurred. People embraced Islam, but it wasn't this. His point was it was a gradual process. No, it wasn't. Not like in the sense that it crept in, creeping Islam and creeping Sharia, and it took over. It didn't work like that. Okay, and yes, the colonialists too tried that, but it didn't work. They tried to spread Christianity in a similar manner. It didn't work. But my point was that it didn't happen in this way that he was saying. And he said that, look, there's an Afghan saying. He said, in fact, sorry, not an Afghan, sorry. He said there's a Taliban saying. I thought, oh, wow. God Saad, whoever he is, this goddamn Saad person. He said, oh, there's a Taliban saying that God has given you watches and he's given us time. That's actually an Arabic saying, by the way, as well, that, they say that عندكم الساعة وعندنا الوقت. And he's supposed to be an Arab, by the way. He said, I'm an Arab, which he didn't know that was an Arab saying, but okay. And he grew up in an Arab country, nevertheless. But the point is that he said that, so what the Taliban are saying to America is that although give us time, we will just Islamize the whole of America. I thought, how ridiculous, and scaremongering rhetoric. America statistically, the DEA have given statistics when it came to America that when you look at things like the cartels, right, take a few cartels, they openly, the US state openly acknowledges, the DEA have acknowledged that things like the Sinaloa cartel, these are you've got a few other they list. They've got the BLO cartel. They've got a few of the Tijuana cartel and a few others operate, that they acknowledge that these cartels operate within the United States. That they have caused more deaths in the United States than both within the same time, within a certain, they give a set number of years that a particular research, I think I actually jotted it somewhere. Right, yes, between 2006 to 2010, they have caused more deaths in the United States than in the Iraq and Afghan war during that period combined. That the Americans dying there, they far outnumber these people, the amount of deaths they've caused in the United States. It's ridiculous. And if we're going to say, and yet, my point of saying this is that it's not to belittle, but it's to say that, look, you're acting like in a particular show that maybe millions of people have heard, or at least 1 million people have heard, that you're acting as though Islam is this huge threat to mankind. Although Muslims, you repeatedly say, are not the threat. You say 99% of them are not the threat. But this 1% is this huge threat. And when you look at extremism, there was a survey done by the ADL Center for Extremism in America that showed in the last decade in America, 71% of all violence linked to extremism was done by the far right, and only 26% was linked to Islam. That's in the last decade. In fact, I was looking at some studies of last year, 2017 was deemed one of the most violent years linked to extremism. I think they rated it the 5th most volatile year for deaths linked to religious extremism or extremism. It came 5th. That was 2017. Now, there were 34 deaths in America, out of which 20 were perpetrated by the far right. So, yet we don't see, people saying, oh my God. They don't want to talk about the far right so much. In fact, in the UK this year, the ex-chief of counterterrorism, he said that the far right are a discussion that the public are not having. And just early this year, 4 attacks were foiled by the far right in the UK alone. This just goes to show some kind of statistic. And the reason I'm saying this is because I accept that, yes, there are certain Muslims that do carry toxic kind of ideologies. They do carry this. I'm not denying that. And that needs to be addressed. But to say that that is Islam, and anybody who's making a difference, he said anybody who's making a difference between Islam and Islamism, or people trying to impose Islam, is just, basically, they're just lying. Because Islam, yes, it has a spiritual path, but the other path really is about forcing people to be Muslim. And unless we're going to talk about this and do this, and he had a very interesting, there was a discussion on immigration. This was really interesting. He said that we should not allow any immigrants into this country that are from Muslim countries because it's a threat to our way of life. I mean, here is an immigrant himself sitting there who still has an accent. I mean, he's from the Middle East, for God's sake. He's an Arab, he's Jewish. He has an accent. He's there saying that immigrants should not be allowed. And then Joe Rogan says to him, at that point, Joe Rogan plays the devil's advocate and says, well, okay, but, there's a lot of atrocities. How do you turn people back like that? And he says, well, okay, I accept that. But in the Middle East, so he uses Syria as an example, Joe Rogan does. And so this Gad Saad says, well, okay, but we go with the most vulnerable first. So Yazidi women and Christian women. But we don't let any Muslims in. And which is just pure fascism. It's just discrimination. And fair enough, Joe Rogan says, but don't you think that's discrimination? And he says, well, okay, I guess so, but okay. And he uses it, and these are his words. He says, okay, we let them in, but they must reject every syllable of any value that goes against our values. And everything before they come in to this, and then we can let them into this country. And I would just like to say, well, what do you mean by our value? What are our values? What does our values mean? Because look, I agree with people when they say that human beings should have freedoms, that we can't persecute people. We can't for their beliefs. I agree with this stuff, that we can't persecute, for example, people, apostates or homosexuals or anybody like this. That, you know, we should be against homophobia. We should be against misogyny. I agree with all of this. But are you telling me that in the West, people themselves don't have these views? Are you telling me that there's many homophobes within the West? Am I wrong? There's many in America. There's so many Christians, especially in the deep South, that they have, that in the Bible Belt, that are rampant homophobes. I mean, they will attack homosexuals. They will beat them up, murder them. They will do stuff like this. They will kill people that are pro-abortion. They will. Is that? I mean, are you? What is our values? There is no homogeny. That's my point. There is no, even when people say, "Oh, our value," yes, promoting freedoms, but to say that everybody is in sync in this part of the world, when somebody comes in, they must jettison everything. That, once again, it promotes a sense of hatred. I found that to be very kind of like, anybody listening to that would all of a sudden, they're prone to maybe having a fear of Muslims, that, oh my God, Muslims may be like this. And Joe Rogan asks this Gadsard that, can you give an example of what Muslims have that are against our values? And he said, yeah, well, they have the Sharia. And the Sharia is built on having a different law for Muslims and non-Muslims. And he gives the example of, if you murdered a Jew, or if a Jew murdered a Muslim, how would the retaliation work within Islam? And he said, well, Islam says this. Well, first of all, Islam is not a kind of monolithic, Sharia is not a monolithic madhab. There are multiple madhabs. Take that rule as an example very clearly. Imam Abu Hanifa clearly rejected that hadith. And his madhab did not support that. It was one of the Hanafi madhab is what ruled a huge part of the Muslim world for centuries on end, from the Abbasids and the Ottomans, which included Lebanon, where this person was from, in which all people are treated equal. So as a Muslim or a non-Muslim, when it came to retaliation of murder. So that was absolutely false. This thing of saying, well, in Islam, they wouldn't be retaliated. They would. And what method? And he said, well, let me get, and he gives this example of dogs. And he says, well, dogs are impure. Once again, the school of Medina, no, they're not. All animals are pure, including pigs. And he said, and us kuffar are as impure to Muslims as, he said, as sperm and feces and urine and stuff like this. No, no, you're not. Who said that? I mean, once again, you're inciting in the listeners hatred against Muslims. But why? That is not even true. First of all, animals are all pure, according to the entire school of Medina, which constitutes the second largest denomination of Muslims in the world. That's the entire North Africa, which was one of the systems that ruled a huge part of the world, of the Muslim world. Right throughout time, there's only been two systems, the Hanafis in the east and the Malikis in the west. For hundreds of years they've ruled, had some of the largest empires on earth. And the Malikis have clearly till today said all animals, all dogs are pure. We've never said they're, and we say humans are pure, Muslim or non-Muslim, in all the Maliki fiqh books, in all the books. So where are you getting this from? Islam says this categorically, Islam, and so I just heard it. It was very hurtful to really, if I'm going to be honest, really, to kind of listen to it. But somebody had sent me the thing and said, look, you know, if you can listen to this and respond. So I because of the way the emotions that it evoked, I felt I needed to respond. And there was an interesting thing he said. He said that, look, there's been studies throughout the Middle East, and 95% of the people had an what did he used an endemic hatred for Jews. This is the word he used. And look, although I accept that many Muslims, I am against people having hatred and having hatred for Jews and I've spoken out before, and I do accept in many parts of the Muslim world, maybe not all, in many parts of the Muslim world, there may be, especially the Middle East, there may be a kind of hatred for Jews. But that is not based on faith. That is based on politics. Like, let's just be real about that. Like, let's just be honest. That is simply caused by the Israeli-Palestine issue and the barbaric atrocities conducted by Israel. The international the international courts have condemned Israel time and time again, you know, for potential wars against humanity, what they're doing in places like Gaza. And yes, it's caused a hell of a lot of bad blood, and it's caused a lot of hatred. And I accept that that may be true and factual, and I can believe that that is true. But that is not based on religion, but on politics. So if you ask them, for example, and how we know that, there are Jews living in, let's say, Morocco. So if you ask those people, as to make it objective, oh, how do you feel about Jews? And they said, well, you know, oh, we don't like them. How do you rate them? I don't know, whatever the charts or the tests were. But if you ask them, well, okay, how do you feel about these particular Jews living in Fez, in Morocco? I guarantee you that most Muslims would be very indifferent and wouldn't have any enmity or towards those Jews that live in Fez, in Morocco as an example. And that's why they live there. But when you say Jews, the first thing that comes to their mind is Israel. And this is how this, and that's the fact that the media has primed them, that when you say Jew, they straight away think of Israel, and then the political, socio-political narrative overtakes them. But if you ask them to neutralize that, okay, how do you feel about this Jewish community living in Fez? They'll probably say, we don't feel anything. You know, like, what about them? Do you think they should be chucked out? I guarantee you they would say no. Do you think they should be attacked? They would say no. So it's false saying that they have an endemic hatred for Jews. But I accept that many Muslims, especially in the Middle East, will have an endemic hatred for Israel. But that's because Israel is a terrorist state. And it conducts acts of, on a state level, of terror against a vulnerable people. So people will have, and that's politics. It's not religion. So, yeah, just, you know, this whole thing really, nevertheless, I just had to kind of vent that. But I was really disappointed. I've not watched much of this Joe Rogan, but when I watched that, I thought, come on, like, how could you let that go on in your show like this? I mean, this is, anybody listening, let's just be honest, like, there is a much greater risk of people in the US or the UK turning to, this is probabilities and just based on mathematics alone, turning to the far right extremism movements, then there is the risk of them turning to Islamic extremism. So this fear that, oh my God, Europe and Muslim and America, he used America on several occasions, he said America will become Islamized, is ridiculous. America's not going to become Islamized. What the hell? The hell are you even on about? But so I mean, that's I wanted to kind of share my thoughts on that. And this thing of saying that, look, and this is the same problem with some ex-Muslims as well, that you see they want to say that Muslims must all accept that this hateful narrative is their Islam, even if they don't want to practice it, that they must accept that. And that's not true, because the Islam is the faith, and the faith is, you could say, it is the interpretation of scholars. Obviously, that's how it's been transmitted. But there are multiple voices. So there are many voices that have challenged other voices throughout the ages. So to say that, no, we must all accept Ibn Taymiyyah, his view on something, when other scholars disagreed with that. we must accept that Islam says you must at all times cut the hand of the thief, when many of the Malikis and the Maliki understanding of Islam disagreed with that. And the Hanafis, according to the Ottomans, disagreed with that. Saying that Islam says there must be a caliphate, when many of the Muslims disagreed with that. Beginning with Dawoodi, the Maliki scholar, coming right through the ages. They disagreed with that. So, you see, it makes it easier for them if all Muslims acknowledge this, that yes, Islam ideologically has all these things. But the truth is, Islam is simply a collection of voices that are saying things, that are transmitting, and they disagree amongst themselves. So to impose one upon the people and say, okay, at least accept that is Islam though, even though you don't, that's not true, because Islam is a narrative. And yes, it can be distorted, but then let's be honest. Look, let's take the American Constitution. The American Constitution was distorted by the Bush administration to conduct acts on what they called enemy combatants, to circumvent human rights when it came to Guantanamo Bay. Now, the point was, they used the American Constitution to do that. So are you going to say the American Constitution is evil? No, you must accept that it's evil. Why? Oh, because the Bush administration used the American Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They used that to justify the... Yeah, but that's... You see, anybody can use anything to justify something. It doesn't mean that is the actual narrative. And likewise, if 99% of Muslims are good, then Muslims are what carry the narrative. So yeah, I mean, I had to say that. Sorry about just that, that rant there, but I just felt that, wow, I can't believe that people so prominent can allow these things to be said, like, very irresponsibly. Right, I'll take a last few questions, people, and then we'll wrap this up. So let's do a rapid round. Any questions? What's going down? What's going on, people? What's going on? I was just going to bring up, right, okay, maybe questions people have submitted. Why do Jamaatis say it is sunnah to eat from one plate? Wasn't that just Arab culture? I'm sure the pagans did that too. This is a good point. Now, I think when it comes to the sunnah, we should treat the sunnah in a positive manner, but not as a superstition. And I'll come to that point in a moment, just answering this first. I'll answer this point first. It is not sunnah to eat from one plate. That's true, it's not. Although the Prophet and people may have eaten from a particular plate, a combined kind of plate, so to speak, but that was just the customary practice, and it's also good to share. So in those environments, people shared in that manner, and it brought about a good sense of community, a sense of family almost. But there's no harm in eating from your own plates and eating with spoons or knife and forks or things like this. It's absolutely fine. And coming to my point that I was saying first, when it comes to eating, you might find a hadith that says you shouldn't eat from the center first. You should eat from the kind of the periphery of the plate, eat in, as opposed to eating from the middle. Now, these kind of things are there's two aspects to this, two layers. One is because they generally ate from one kind of large tray, then naturally somebody putting his hand right into the middle upsets it for everybody else. But eating from the periphery would be where you sat, you just ate from that part. So that was good manners the Prophet was teaching. Secondly, these things are just said to teach some etiquettes, and they can be taken, if a person wants to eat always from the periphery in, that's fine. But as a positive note, but we should never allow these things to become superstition. Right, so it doesn't become something like, oh my God, I did this, something bad's going to happen, or I've done something wrong, or there should be guilt, or this deserves telling off, or this deserves... It's not like that. So if you want to do it as an etiquette, that's fine, but don't let it turn into a superstition. So what's the... I've lost all religious motivation to study or pray. What can I do to change it? Sam Ali. See, when it comes to praying, how about you begin... Look, all of these things will come back to willpower and determination. You have to remember, look, let's take a look at this verse of the Quran, where Allah says, مَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have not created the jinn, and so what we see, and mankind, that now people translate this إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, except so that they can worship me. So the sole purpose of mankind is to worship God. This is how many people translate this. I feel that's a wrong translation. Okay. And the translation here, illa, except, or this illa, which comes sometimes as an atf as well, it kind of attaches. Li, this lam is not, people are translating it as the cause. So I created them, and the cause, the whole thing was liya'budun, so they can worship me. That ought to be translated. This was not in that sense sababiyya, this lam. This was in terms of consequence. Okay, I have not, that Allah saying, I have created them. And as a consequence, they worship me. So it is a sense of gratitude, not a sense of compulsion in the sense of, I created you, now worship me. It isn't like that. That's not how it ought to be read. You can read it, but that's not how it ought to be read. It ought to be read that I have created them, and therefore they as a consequence worship me. So there's a kind of, you see that human beings are doing that, looking back at the whole blessing that Allah has given them. So I would say, look, if you're struggling with worship, then maybe start off by doing all the obligatory prayers together just before you sleep. Just the fara'id. And then maybe as time goes by, you can maybe split them into maybe a portion in the day and a portion at night, and then maybe... and knowledge, it's I'm telling you, the more you learn, you'll become obsessed with learning. You just have to take that first step. And the journey, like they say, of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Right, okay. What do you do? Right, Qibla direction. From the Maliki point of view, you see, Qibla direction is, right, if you're as far away as Sweden from Makkah and you've been praying in one direction and the coordinates differ 5 to 10 degrees, that's okay. Look, when you're pointing to the Qibla, really you can have a huge leeway. You can be off technically by an entire 90 degrees. So it could be that way and you're praying that way. You could be, according to the Maliki school. So the point is, look, don't worry about 10. You know, like sometimes you put your mat down and somebody says, or if somebody is praying, sorry, you're praying in a place and somebody says, no, it's that way. I gotta say, I've done that on a few occasions just to take the mick. I've gone with a straight face. No, I'm sorry, it's that way. The person just can't tell what I've just said. It's just a fraction, just that way. And so, yeah, so nevertheless, it's all good. It's all good. Right. Now, what else? Any quick, rapid questions? Let's see. All right, we've got to wrap this up within a few minutes, people. What do you think about Salah sitting in the car? I've said that already. Falling into shirk. Amy has asked, We will not worship idols and things like this. That is true. You see, I think that although we won't worship, you see, this is a very good point. Somebody asked me at the event, at the discussion in Glasgow, that the path to Jannah is paved with hardships. So why do you say that, you know, ease and stuff like this? And I said there, and I'll repeat it here, that look, yes, I agree with you, but we disagree perhaps. I mean, first of all, I said there may be a discussion on the Hadith, but let's just take the meaning. I agree with you in its meaning, but we disagree in what hardships means. So you're taking things like let's say you're taking things like, oh, I have to do wudu, I hate doing wudu, I hate praying, that to mean hardships, and that could be interpreted as hardships. But to me, hardship is, and this comes to this question that Amy has asked, that not so easily falling at times of adversity into superstition. It is so hard not to fall into superstition. People, I'm telling you, you know, thinking by removing the blinkers of superstition is not an easy task. Hence, most of mankind so easily fall into some kind of abstract superstitious rituals, even in the West, where there isn't religion, but this thing like, for example, touch wood or this or that, superstitions, reading horoscopes, or doing things like, people need lucky charms or these kind of things, because whereas really the path to Jannah ought to be about just true understanding of Tawheed, of the oneness of the Creator, not falling into these little, what I would call shirky elements of superstition and stuff like this. So although worshipping idols is not a threat, but superstition still remains a strong threat to humans, and Muslims are no mistake. Are 2 female witnesses required in 28? No, they're not. I've answered this. I've got a detailed video on it. Please watch it. I've mentioned that was to do with the subjugation of witnesses. It was to do with the intimidation of witnesses, which was far easily or more easily done to women as opposed to men. So if that does happen anywhere in the world today, then it does apply to safeguard the witnesses and for there not to be a miscarriage of justice. And it would equally apply to men as well. Okay. And no, it's not the case, generally speaking. Please respond to ex-Muslims' post about Jaun Elia. I'm not sure what their post is, but sure, I will respond in due time. Right, people, any last 1-2 questions? All right. Is it okay to eat meat which is not halal in Christian countries like USA? If it's Christian and stuff like this, and they are heavily Christian, then technically you can, I guess. Although it's always good to have that sense of identity by sticking to halal meat where it's possible. Come to New York. Inshallah, why not? All right, why not? Why not? Doing it, people. You're doing it. Salam after Jummah. I'm not sure what salam after Jummah means. Oh, sorry, salatu salam. Like, what is it? Shamay bazme velak. In a lot of the masjids. I mean, these things are folkloric. People do them. This is really folklore religion. I mean, it's not obviously authentic Islam, but people are going to do it. There's no... I wouldn't kind of throw a fuss about it or anything. Come to Jannah, akhi. Are you just watching my Facebook Live in Jannah? The video on Jesus, it is coming, it is coming. Don't worry, people, just hang in there. The research is still going on. It's just been, I keep getting interrupted. I keep getting interrupted. I need dream interpreting. Don't worry about it. You just need a good night's sleep and some good dreams. Don't worry about it, people. Views on intercession. Intercession, as in asking the dead to help you. See, this is superstition, all of this stuff. Any evidence that men don't need to keep beards? I've got a video clip on beards. It's all there. We don't need evidences for don'ts, by the way. We need evidences for do's and musts. As in when it comes to obligations. So you don't say, what is your dalil that we don't need to keep a beard? That's not how it works. That's illogical and irrational. So what you say is, where is your evidence? Because by default, nothing stands. So by default, you can do whatever you like. Now you need clear-cut evidence. Overwhelmingly, it must be conclusive in order to overrule that law of default, which is called al-asl fil ashya' al-ibaha. So now there isn't any compelling evidence that men must grow their beards like that. But I've got a whole detailed video. You can watch that. Right, so difference between Mutah and Misyar. I've answered that before. It's basically, Misyar is like the Sunni version of... It's like a kind of botched up version of Mut'ah. Misyar is simply a low commitment marriage that is practiced, and they've given it the name Misyar. It's like a slang term, I think. But generally, Mut'ah is the classical debate of a temporary marriage that self-terminates. Right, okay, your opinion about Men of the Cave and the miracle by Allah. I've answered this before, Saad Sheikh. You can check it out. I do explain in there, Allah does not say that they slept for 309 years, but rather He says that they said, that this is them saying it. And Allah knows better and knows best about how much they actually slept for. So, and to the extent that some of the companions read that as a verse, وَقَالُوا, but it's attached onto that. So, nevertheless, I've got a whole video on that, you can check it. I've got a whole clip on that, you can check it out. People, Chris, alright, you're doing it all the way from Glasgow. Alright, a wee bit. People, your opinion on meat made in the lab. Meat that is synthetic and artificial, has been manufactured, is permissible to eat. It's not haram. Right, people, I'm gonna leave you with that. Will this be on YouTube? Hell yeah, inshallah. Right, folks, any questions, you can reach out to me, Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, any of those things. Right, just before I go, I'd heard today the tragic news of Sheikh Haroon Hanif, who's from the UK, from Liverpool, and that his young, relatively newborn, I think a few months old daughter, Badriya, had passed away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him, his wife, his family ease. Remember them in your thoughts and du'as, people. And may Allah replace his difficulties, his grief, and anybody who is suffering from such a calamitous tragedy, really, to befall anybody throughout the world. May Allah grant them ease and grant them joy, ameen, and blessings. Okay, people, inshallah, till next week, take care of yourselves. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.